The alarm inside the Chicago Police Department headquarters didn't sound like a normal alert. It wasn't loud. It was wrong. A low, distorted tone that made every officer in the building pause for half a second longer than they should have. Detective Maria Collins was already moving before the radio call finished. Missing person confirmed inside evidence storage unit. All interior cameras offline. No motion data. Repeat, no motion data. Maria didn't respond. She was already running. Agent Daniel Reyes caught up with her in the hallway, his voice sharp. This doesn't make sense. No one just disappears inside a locked evidence room. Maria didn't slow down. Then we're dealing with someone who wants it to look like no one was ever there. They reached the secured floor. The evidence storage section of the Chicago PD was supposed to be the most controlled environment in the building. Biometric locks, motion sensors, redundant cameras. But as the door slid open, Maria immediately felt it. The air was colder than it should have been. Not freezing, but noticeably wrong. Like the room had forgotten how temperature worked. A technician was standing outside the entrance, pale and shaken. We checked everything, doors never opened, no forced entry, no exit logs, nothing. Reyes looked at him. So where is the missing person? The technician hesitated. That's the thing, sir. There was no missing person assigned to this room. Maria stopped walking. That sentence didn't fit anything logical. Repeat that, she said quietly. The technician swallowed. The system flagged a disappearance inside evidence storage. But when we checked the personnel logs, no officer, no civilian, no authorized staff were inside at the time. Reyes exhaled sharply. So the system is lying. Maria stepped closer to the evidence room door. The biometric scanner blinked green. Unlocked, which meant someone inside the system had approved access. But no one remembered doing it. She pushed the door open. Inside the evidence room. The room was perfectly intact. Rows of sealed containers. Archived files. Cold fluorescent lighting. Nothing out of place. Except the central surveillance monitor on the far wall was still on. But frozen. Not paused. Frozen. The last frame showed the exact moment before the system failed. A static image of the room itself. Empty. Maria walked closer. Reyes stayed behind her, scanning corners. If someone was taken here, there should be physical trace, drag marks, blood, anything. Maria didn't answer. She was staring at the monitor. Something was wrong with it. Not visually. Structurally. The image wasn't just frozen. It was repeating. The same 3 seconds. Looping. Over and over. She leaned in closer. And then she noticed it. A reflection. In the glass of the monitor. Behind her. A silhouette. Standing too still. Maria spun instantly. Empty room. Reyes stepped forward. You saw something. Maria didn't lower her weapon. Someone was here. Reyes checked the perimeter. Doors are sealed. No alarms, no breach. Maria walked toward the evidence shelves. That's when she saw it. A single file drawer slightly open. Every other drawer perfectly aligned. Only one disturbed. She pulled it open. Inside, nothing, except a thin layer of frost lining the metal. Fresh. Reyes frowned. That's impossible, frost indoors. Maria touched it. Immediately pulled her hand back. The metal was freezing cold. Not cold like air conditioning. Cold like it had been exposed to sub-zero weather. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim red glow filling the room. Reyes raised his flashlight. Okay, this is officially not normal anymore. Maria didn't move. Because she heard it. A sound. Very faint. Like footsteps. But not on the floor. On something softer. Like snow. Inside a sealed room. Then the voice came. Calm. Controlled. Almost close enough to be inside her head. You always arrive after the system fails. Reyes turned sharply. Who's there? Silence. Then, a single file folder slid across the floor, stopping exactly at Maria's feet. She looked down. It had no label. No case number. Just a symbol drawn in ink. A snowflake. Reyes stepped closer. Don't touch it. But Maria already had. The moment her fingers touched the folder, the temperature dropped again. Instantly, her breath became visible in the air. Reyes noticed it too. Maria stepped back. She opened it. Inside were photographs. Not crime scene photos. Personal ones. People she didn't recognize at first. But then, her expression changed. Because she realized something terrifying. Every single face in the folder had appeared in Chicago missing person reports over the last 4 winters. Reyes looked over her shoulder. These are victims. Maria shook her head slowly. No. She turned another page. And froze. Because there was a photo of her father. Dated 14 years ago. Marked with a handwritten note. Failed evacuation protocol, subject connected. Reyes stepped back instinctively. Maria, why is your father in this file? But Maria wasn't listening. Because the room temperature was still dropping. And the frost on the walls was spreading. Slowly. Like something invisible was breathing through the structure. Then the lights flickered again. And for half a second, the entire evidence room looked like it had transformed. Not into ice, but into a memory of a snowstorm. White, endless, silent. Reyes grabbed her arm. We need to leave now. But Maria didn't move. Because, in the reflection of the glass monitor, she saw it again. The silhouette. Closer this time. Standing directly behind her. And this time, it didn't disappear. And the emergency door behind them suddenly locked. From the outside. And the voice returned, calm, closer, undeniable. Detective Collins, you finally opened the right file. Maria slowly turned her head. And for the first time, she saw him clearly. Standing in the freezing evidence room. Not breaking in. Not hiding. Just waiting. And he said one final sentence. Now you remember winter. If you want, I can. Continue with part 2, 1,000 words where we reveal Elias Mercer's origin, Rey's hidden connection, and the first direct murder linked to the winter pattern. Continue part 2, 1,000 words. Part 2, the man behind the snowflake. The evidence room door locked with a heavy mechanical clunk that echoed like a gunshot in the sealed space. Maria Collins didn't move. Neither did the man standing in front of her. He wasn't dressed like a typical suspect. No frantic energy, no panic, no attempt to escape. Just a dark winter coat, slightly damp at the shoulders, as if he had walked through a storm that only existed around him. Agent Daniel Reyes raised his weapon immediately. Step away from her now. The man didn't look at Reyes. His eyes stayed on Maria. Calm, observant, almost familiar. You're holding it incorrectly, the man said quietly. Ray's tightened his grip. I said step away. The man finally turned his head slightly toward Ray's. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. You always were impatient during evacuations. Maria's breath caught. Ray's went still for half a second, just long enough for Maria to notice. The man had said it like a memory, not an insult. Who are you? Maria asked. A pause. Then, you already know the answer, you just haven't accepted it yet. The room temperature dropped another degree. Frost crept along the edges of the metal shelves, slow and deliberate, like something alive mapping the environment. Ray stepped forward again. Last warning. The man finally looked directly at him. Daniel Ray's, still trying to correct outcomes you helped create. Ray's froze. Maria turned sharply toward him. You know him. Ray's didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said everything. The man exhaled slowly. 14 years is a long time to forget responsibility. Maria lowered her weapon slightly, just enough for confusion to show. 14 years ago what? Silence. Then the man took a step sideways, as if giving them space to think. Chicago Emergency Disaster Response Unit, Winter Storm, Western Freight Corridor collapse. Ray's jaw tightened. Maria looked between them. What is he talking about? Ray's finally spoke, voice lower now. It was an evacuation operation during a blizzard, structural collapse. We lost the transport team. Maria's eyes narrowed. We. Ray's didn't correct her. That was the answer. The man nodded once. 7 people entered that zone, he said. Only 2 made the decision to leave on time. Maria felt something shift in her stomach. And the others? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward the center of the room. Frost spread beneath his steps. Not like melting cold. Like controlled expansion. They waited for instructions, he said. They followed protocol, they trusted timing. He stopped near the evidence table. And Winter did what Winter always does when you hesitate. Maria's voice tightened. You're talking about their deaths like it's physics. The man looked at her. It is. Ray stepped forward. Stop, this isn't a philosophical lecture. The man nodded. No, it's a pattern. He reached into his coat and placed something on the table. A small metal tag. Burned at the edges. A name still faintly visible. Maria leaned closer. Her expression changed instantly. Because she recognized it. It was one of the victims from the missing person list. But not just any victim. The first one from this winter. Where did you get that? She asked sharply. The man didn't answer. Instead, he said something that shifted the entire weight of the room. He didn't disappear in Chicago. Ray's frowned. What? The man continued. He disappeared in the same place all of them do. Maria's voice dropped. There's no pattern outside Chicago. A faint, almost sad smile formed on the man's face. You're only looking at the snowfall. A pause. Not the timing before it. Ray stepped closer. What does that mean? The man finally turned fully toward them. Winter doesn't begin when snow falls. It begins when conditions align. Maria felt her pulse tighten. Conditions for what? The man looked directly at her. For selection. The lights flickered again. Harder this time. The emergency backup system struggled to stabilize. And somewhere deep in the building, metal groaned under sudden cold stress. Ray's raised his voice. This building is sealed. No one is selecting anything here. The man tilted his head slightly. No. A pause. Not here. Then, the radio on Ray's shoulder crackled violently. Static filled the room. Then a voice broke through. Panicked. Distorted. Ray's, do you copy? There's something outside, repeat, something outside the perimeter. The transmission cut mid-sentence. Ray's looked up sharply. That's the perimeter security feed. Maria moved instantly toward the control panel. The screen flickered, then stabilized. What she saw made her stop breathing for half a second. Outside the Chicago Police Department building, snow was falling, but not naturally. It was falling in a perfect circular motion around the building, as if the storm itself had chosen a boundary. And inside that circle, a single figure stood motionless, watching. Ray's whispered, "That's impossible. There's no storm system in the city yet." The man in the evidence room spoke softly behind them. "There is now." Maria turned back to him. "What did you do?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the snowflake symbol on the file Maria was still holding. "I didn't create it," he said. "I continued it." Ray snapped. "Continued what?" The man finally met his eyes. The evacuation failure was never corrected. It was replicated. Maria felt her grip tighten on the file. "Replicated." The man nodded. "Every winter since." A silence fell so heavy it felt physical. Ray shook his head. "That's not possible." The man's voice stayed steady. "It is when someone studies what happens to people when systems fail under identical conditions." Maria's mind raced. "You're saying the disappearances are experiments?" The man didn't deny it. That was the answer. The entire room felt colder again. Frost now covered half the table. Ray's took a step back, realizing something he didn't want to accept. "You're not a victim," he said quietly. The man finally looked at him again. "No." A pause. "I'm the result." The emergency door behind them suddenly unlocked with a sharp electronic click. Maria turned instantly. Ray's raised his weapon again. But the man didn't move toward escape. He stepped closer to Maria instead. Just enough for her to hear him clearly. "You should leave before the system completes alignment." Maria narrowed her eyes. "What system?" The man looked past her, toward the hallway beyond the door. "The one already mapping your next winter." A distant alarm began to rise through the building. Slow at first, then louder, then overlapping. Multiple systems activating at once. Ray shouted, "We're getting out of here now." But Maria didn't move, because she realized something worse. The snowflake file in her hand was no longer cold. It was warm. And slowly, it was changing. The footsteps in the hallway didn't rush. They measured the distance. One step, pause, another step, pause again. Like whoever was walking already knew exactly how much fear they were producing with each second of silence. Inside the evidence room, Maria Collins stayed frozen, eyes locked on the doorway. Agent Daniel Ray stood slightly behind her, weapon raised but unsteady now. Not fear of the unknown. Fear of recognition. The man in the winter coat didn't move toward the door either. He simply said, almost calmly, "He's early this time." Maria didn't look away. "Who is he?" The man's eyes stayed on the corridor. "The one who confirms the cycle." The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then, a soft electronic beep. The biometric lock on the evidence room door blinked green. "Unlocked." Ray's frowned immediately. "That's not possible. This room is sealed from external access." Maria whispered, unless someone inside the system approved it. The man finally stepped slightly aside. Not hiding, not retreating, positioning, like he was preparing for a known event. The door slid open. Cold air flooded in. But it wasn't normal cold. It carried something heavier. Stillness. A man stood in the doorway, not wearing tactical gear. Not a detective. Not even an officer. Just a plain dark coat, soaked slightly at the shoulders, like he had walked through miles of snowfall without ever stopping. He looked at Maria first, then at Reyes, then at the man inside the room. And finally he smiled faintly. Condition confirmed. Reyes stepped forward immediately. Identify yourself. The man in the doorway didn't answer him. Instead, he spoke to the man inside the room. You deviated from observation parameters. The winter-coated man inside replied without hesitation. I extended the dataset. That sentence made Maria's stomach tighten. Reyes lowered his weapon slightly. Dataset. The man in the doorway finally stepped inside. And the temperature dropped again. Instantly. More sharply this time. Frost formed visibly along the edges of Maria's breath. Winter selection protocol requires controlled repetition, the newcomer said. Maria's voice sharpened. What protocol? The man tilted his head slightly. You are standing inside it. Reyes shook his head. This is a police facility, not an experiment lab. The man's eyes flicked to Reyes. You were present at the original failure. Silence. That hit differently now. Not confusion. Recognition. Maria looked at Reyes instantly. You said it was an evacuation accident. Reyes didn't answer immediately. The man in the doorway continued. 7 subjects, 1 storm event, 1 failed decision point. He looked at Maria now. 2 operators survived the initial collapse. Maria's voice dropped. Operators. The man nodded. You call them responders. Reyes finally spoke, voice tight. Stop this. You're describing a disaster, not a system. The man stepped further into the room. Everything becomes a system when repeated under controlled variables. He gestured slightly, and the monitors in the room flickered. Suddenly, footage appeared. Not live. Old. Snowstorm footage. Emergency vehicles stuck in whiteout conditions. Collapsed structures. Panic. Maria recognized it instantly. Chicago Storm archive footage. But then, she saw something she shouldn't have. A control room feed overlay. With her father inside it. Working communications. Reyes stood still. That file was sealed. The man nodded. Not sealed, archived for continuity. Maria's voice cracked slightly. My father was involved in this. The man looked at her directly. He executed timing clearance. Reyes stepped forward sharply. That's enough. The man didn't react. Instead, he said something that changed the entire tone of the room. He approved evacuation delay. Silence. That phrase hung heavier than anything else so far. Maria turned slowly toward Reyes. You said you left people behind. Reyes' jaw tightened. I made a call under extreme conditions. The man interrupted. You made a selection. A long silence followed. Then, the hallway lights outside flickered violently. Emergency alarms started escalating. Not random. Structured. Like a sequence activating in layers. The man in the doorway looked toward the ceiling. Phase 2 initiated. Maria snapped. Phase 2 of what? The man finally answered her directly. Re-execution cycle. Reyes took a step back. You're talking about repeating the same disaster. The man nodded. With variable outcomes. Maria stared at him. People are dying. The man's expression didn't change. Data requires completion. Reyes raised his weapon again. This ends now. But the winter-coated man inside the room suddenly stepped forward. And for the first time, he spoke with urgency. No, if you interrupt the cycle mid-phase, it expands uncontrollably. Maria turned to him sharply. What does that mean? He hesitated. Just briefly. Then, you don't stop winter halfway. A loud metallic sound echoed through the building. Not outside. Inside the walls. Like something massive shifting structure. Reyes looked toward the hallway. We're leaving now. But the man in the doorway raised his hand slightly. And every exit indicator on the panel turned red. Locked. Maria stepped back. You locked the building. The man shook his head. No. A pause. The system did. Suddenly, the floor beneath them vibrated slightly. Not earthquake. Mechanical. Controlled. The man inside the room spoke again, faster now. They activated full containment sequence. Reyes turned sharply. Who is they? The man looked at him. The ones who survived before you. That sentence landed heavier than anything else. Maria felt her pulse rise. There are others. The man nodded. Previous cycles. The lights flickered again. And then, every screen in the room changed simultaneously. A map of Chicago appeared. But not normal. It was divided into zones. Each zone labeled with a symbol. A snowflake. Reyes whispered. That's the entire city. The man nodded again. Selection grid. Maria stepped closer to the screen. Selection for what? The man finally answered fully. Survival probability evaluation under controlled winter conditions. A long silence followed. Then Maria said quietly, You're saying the entire city is part of this. The man didn't deny it. That was the answer. Reyes lowered his weapon slightly. For the first time, uncertainty replaced control. This is insane. The winter-coated man inside the room spoke again. It already happened before you arrived. Maria turned to him. Before us. He nodded. 3 full cycles. Reyes whispered. We're not the first. The man in the doorway corrected him calmly. You are not even the middle. A distant sound echoed through the building. Like ice cracking under pressure. Then, all the monitors shut off at once. Darkness. Emergency lights switched to deep red again. The man in the doorway took one final step back. Phase acceleration complete. Maria stepped forward. Wait, what happens now? He looked at her. For the first time. Something like pity. Now winter decides what remains. Then he turned. And walked back into the hallway. Reyes moved instantly toward the door. But it wouldn't open. Locked again. From the outside, Maria rushed to the control panel. But every system showed the same message. Citywide selection active. Reyes turned slowly toward her. Maria were inside it. The winter-coated man in the room whispered. No. A pause. You are at the center. And then, outside the building, snow began to fall. Harder than before. But perfectly still. Like the entire sky had stopped moving. Midnight in Chicago didn't arrive with silence. It arrived with pressure, like the entire city was being slowly pressed inward by something unseen. Inside the Chicago Police Department, emergency systems flickered between life and shutdown. Red lights washed over the evidence floor like an endless warning that no one could respond to anymore. Maria Collins stood in the center of the room, staring at the screen. Final selection will begin at midnight. The message didn't blink anymore. It just stayed. Agent Daniel Reyes paced once, then stopped, forcing control into his voice. We need to shut down the central grid. If this is a system, it has a core. The winter-coated man, still present, still calm, answered without looking at him. There is no single core. Reyes turned sharply. Everything has a core. The man shook his head. Not distributed selection systems. Maria looked up slowly. Distributed. The man finally faced her. Winter is not controlled from one point. It's replicated across conditions: temperature, timing, human response. A pause. The city is the processor. That sentence made the room feel smaller. Reyes refused to accept it. You're saying Chicago itself is running this? The man didn't correct him. That silence was worse than confirmation. Maria stepped closer to the screen again. The city map was now fully active. Every district marked. Every mark pulsing faintly. Snowflake symbol spread across neighborhoods like infection points. And at the center, a single blinking zone. Downtown core active node. Maria whispered, "That's us." Reyes looked at her. "We're inside the highest concentration point." Suddenly, a sound came through the building. Not through speakers. Not through systems. Through the structure itself. A deep metallic hum. Like steel remembering pressure. The winter-coated man spoke again, more quietly now. The first failure created the model. Maria turned toward him. The storm 14 years ago. He nodded. Correct. Reyes stepped forward. It was an accident. The man looked at him. It was a threshold event. Maria's voice tightened. Stop talking in codes. What actually happened? A pause. Then, the man spoke clearly. 7 responders entered a collapsing winter logistics zone. Command delay protocol was activated by senior officer approval. Maria turned slowly toward Reyes. He didn't deny it this time. He just said, "We were losing visibility. Structural collapse risk was rising. I delayed evacuation to stabilize extraction." Silence. Maria's voice dropped. People died because of that. Reyes' jaw tightened. People die in disasters. The man interrupted him instantly. Not in controlled simulations. That word hit differently. Maria stared at him. Simulation. He nodded. The first incident was later reconstructed as a predictive model. Reyes shook his head. That's not possible. The man stepped closer. It was possible once the data was preserved. Maria's mind raced. So Mercer, the man completed her thought, was the observer assigned to analyze deviation. Reyes frowned. Mercer is the killer behind this. The man finally shook his head. Mercer is the first survivor who refused to accept randomness. A long silence. Then Maria whispered, "He's trying to control outcomes." The man nodded. "He is trying to eliminate uncertainty." Reyes stepped forward again, more desperate now. Where is he now? The lights flickered. And for the first time, every screen in the building switched simultaneously. A live feed appeared. Chicago streets. covered in snow. Empty. Then, a figure appeared at the center of the intersection, outside the building. Standing still. Watching. Maria's breath caught. That's him. The winter-coated man looked at the screen. Final observer position confirmed. Reyes raised his weapon again. We end this now. But Maria grabbed his arm. No, listen. If the city is the system, shutting one man down won't stop it. Reyes snapped. Then what will? The man answered before Maria could. Completion. Silence. Maria looked at him sharply. Completion of what? He looked at her directly. The cycle. Suddenly, the entire building shook. Not violently, but structurally, like something beneath the city had just shifted alignment. The screens changed again. A countdown appeared. 00, 10, 00. Ray stepped back. What is that? The man answered calmly. Final convergence window. Maria realized something horrifying. Convergence of what? The man finally spoke the truth without abstraction. All remaining variables. Reyes whispered. People. The man nodded once. Yes. A pause. And outcomes. Maria stepped forward. How do we stop it? The man looked at her for a long moment. Then said, You don't. That answer wasn't cruel. It was factual. Reyes shook his head. There's always a shutdown protocol. The man responded instantly. Only if the system allows discontinuation. Maria's voice lowered. And does it? The man looked at her. It did not survive previous cycles. A heavy silence fell. Then, the countdown continued. 000841. Maria made a decision. If the system uses the city, we isolate the node. Reyes frowned. That's impossible at this scale. Maria turned to him. Not if we remove the center. Reyes realized what she meant. We are the center. Silence. The truth landed fully now. The winter-coated man nodded slightly. Correct. Reyes whispered. So we're the trigger. Maria looked at the screen. Then at Reyes. Then at the man. And Mercer. The man answered. He is the observer outside the system. Reyes shook his head. Then where is he now? The screen changed again. Zoomed out. And there he was. Standing in the snowstorm outside. Completely still. Not moving. Just watching the building. Waiting. Maria's voice tightened. He's waiting for the result. The man nodded. He always does. The countdown hit. 000200. Reyes looked at Maria. We're not making it out of this, are we? Maria didn't answer immediately. Because she realized something. This wasn't about survival. It never was. It was about selection under pressure. She looked at the winter-coated man. What happens when it reaches 0? He answered quietly. The system resolves uncertainty. Reyes whispered. Meaning? The man met his eyes. It decides what version of the city continues. The building began shaking again. Harder this time. Systems failing across levels. Outside, snowfall intensified into a full whiteout. Maria took a slow breath. Then did something unexpected. She turned toward the control console. Reyes stepped forward. Maria, what are you doing? She looked at him. If it selects outcomes, we change the input. Reyes frowned. How? Maria placed her hand on the system interface and said, "We introduce a contradiction." The winter-coated man watched silently. For the first time, not predicting, just observing. The countdown hit. 000010. Ray stepped closer. "Maria, if this goes wrong." She cut him off. "It already did 14 years ago." 000003. Maria activated the override. Every screen in the city flickered violently. Snow outside began to swirl upward instead of downward. Time felt unstable. 000001. Mercer outside finally moved. Just slightly, as if realizing something unexpected. 000000. Silence. Then, nothing happened. No explosion. No collapse. No reset. Just stillness. Maria looked at the screen, confused. Reyes looked around. Did it fail? The winter-coated man whispered, "No." A pause. It changed resolution criteria. Maria turned slowly. "What does that mean?" The man looked at her. And for the first time, his expression wasn't calm. It was uncertain. It selected differently. Outside, Mercer lowered his head slightly, then turned away, and walked into the snow, disappearing. Reyes whispered, "So it's over." The man didn't answer immediately, then said, "No." A final pause. "It has simply learned new variables." Maria looked at the city screens. The snowflake symbols were gone, but in their place, one new message appeared across every system. Next winter, continuation confirmed. Final shot. Chicago slowly returned to normal. But Maria never forgot what she saw in the snow that night. Because sometimes, when the first winter wind returns, the system doesn't start again. It remembers where it left off. And somewhere in the city, Elias Mercer is still watching, waiting for the next selection.